Tell me when you say it. We're on. Well, good early afternoon. We are live from the wharf here in Orange Beach, Alabama. I'm Andy Andrews. This is the Blue Plate Special. We're going to have a fun time today. I know you guys are already piling in from all over. There's, who's that? That's Mandy. Hey, Mandy. And a bunch of you guys. Oh, my gosh. Good grief. This is going so fast. Patricia Clapp from North Carolina. You're almost always the first one on, Patricia. Do you just like watch this thing, this Facebook thing? I've got a couple of really cool things to talk to you about today. I'm going to tell another story. George Cosser III. George Cosser is like the Ole Miss standard, I think. I said something to Ty Bullard about it. I said, do you know George Cosser? Because Ty went to Ole Miss, and he said, the Cossers are like legends at Ole Miss. And Rhonda Scott Ferguson, hey, how are you doing? Oh, my gosh. Mark Lowry. Hey, Mark Lowry. There's Mark. Why don't you meet Rhonda Ferguson? Rhonda, this is Mark Lowry. Yes, we had pizza the other day, and it was so great. We appreciate so much Gina Christmas providing the pizza for us. We ordered it from Domino's because I believe their commercial where they said that they don't touch anything. And Sandra from Searcy, Arkansas, home of Harding University, where they ate their mascot. Yes, that's another story. Judson Perkins, the Bradley Cooper fan club is here. Yeah, thank you. You and Polly. He's referring to the Professional Noticer this week that came out where I answered 100 questions. It was the 100th episode of the Professional Noticer, and Matt asked me 100 questions, and several of them had Bradley Cooper answers because of Polly. Jason Crabb is here. Jason, hey, buddy. Hey, if you guys would, please click that notification button and please share this to your page right now, if you will. We'll just take a minute. There, I'm sure you've already done it by now, but if you could share this, they're going to want to hear this story I've got. I'm going to tell you the story today because somebody asked after the show Tuesday, I think it was, where we talked about Dottie West, and I told the story of me like knocking her to the floor and coming out at the wrong time at the end. You can see this if you go back and look at the other episode. But somebody asked, they say you sure seem to have a lot of stories about famous people, and I said I do. I don't know why, but I do. Because somebody had asked me one time, hey, Benny Wilford. Somebody asked me one time. They said you have been very successful. I said I don't know how successful I've been, but for whatever reason, God has seen me, seen fit to put me as a viewer of success. I've been there in the presence of success. Cindy Ziegler Oates, I got to eat and be around her dad, Zig Ziglar. Bob Woodall, hey buddy. So you're ready for some thought-provoking stuff, a tear or two? I don't know if there'll be any tears today. It might be some thought-provoking stuff before I get to my story, but there's definitely going to be some laughter. I'm going to tell you the story because somebody asked. They said, "Do you have more stories?" I said, "Oh my gosh, I get." And of course, when they asked that, Polly, like her eyes rolled back in her head. Does he have more stories? Don't get him started. I have tons of stories about some of the stars and people that I've been around. Hey, PC and Yvonne, and. Yeah, I've got a lot of stories. And so today I'm going to tell the story of the biggest disaster I ever saw in person on live television. I was right in the middle of it, but for once I didn't cause it. But it was epic. Okay, and so I'm going to tell that story here in just a few minutes. We're still right in the middle of this pandemic death plague. People are hunkering down. I think we ought to have... Mark, I think we ought to have an official name, because they talk about different times in history. And I think we should, from now on, call this the Great Hunkering. I think that history will look back in history books and said in the Great Hunkering of 2020, when all over the world people were hunkering down. But we're still kind of hunkering, and July 4th is coming up, and all over people they're kind of closing stuff. But as far as I know, we're still rocking and rolling here on the Gulf Coast. Mark Lowry, you just made me laugh so hard. I was watching the Yeary Chapel yesterday, watching Jimmy Yeary and watching you comment, and I was just laughing. You just make me laugh, and you're a great friend to have. It's good to have a friend who can make you laugh at any time, and Mark is one of those for me. I was looking at the news briefly this morning, and the thing that hit me, and I don't look at the news every day, but every now and then I'll go in, I look, see what I need to see, and get out. Just make sure we aren't sliding off some cliff like within the next couple of hours, and so Benny Williford up in North Carolina, you will get a kick out of this because we have talked about this kind of stuff before. I saw that the Russian people have had an election, and what a wonderful time for such a free state that they can have an election, and 78% of them voted, and Putin is now in power, or president, whatever you want to call it, until 2036. I'm sure it was all very above board, very fair, and with 78% of the vote, I'm sure they're also tracking down that 22% that didn't vote for him right now, and will be inserting the thumb screws sometime during the show. 2036. I mean, I don't know how you do that. He's building a house. Maybe it's already built. I don't know. Hey, Brandon. Building a house in Russia that is costing $1 billion. A house that's $1 billion. I'm not sure what you can put in a house to make a house cost $1 billion. I mean, because once you put a roller rink and a bowling alley and a couple of swimming pools, a hangar for your jet, what do you put in a house that would make it worth $1 billion? I don't have any idea. I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, he makes me nervous. These people, but pretty much a lot of politicians make me nervous. I have what I have called for a while. How do I say this? Because I say it a little bit differently for my close friends. Hey, Bonnie Nix, and that honey, thank you so much. That honey is so good. I appreciate so much. I was sending it right. You thank you for our package that we got the other day from Ubon. I'm trying to think. How do I give you my theory? I called this. I thought about this for a while, and I kind of came up with it when I was writing "How do you kill 11 million people?" And I'm wanting to write something there that sees underneath. I want to write something that doesn't say Republican, doesn't say Democrat, but everybody would agree with. Alex says, $500,000 toilet. That would probably put him over the top. Or $500 million toilet, that's what he said. He might need one because he certainly seems to be full of it. I think that when you look at situations like, Germany back in the 30s and 40s, obviously, I mean, the German people were lied to, right? This is the point of how do you kill 11 million people? You lie to them, and And so if people are lied to, if they don't know the truth, somehow they goad these people into fighting and like going and like attacking the world. And so I just have wondered, do they really hate us? Do the Russian people really hate us? I mean, the people, okay? And because I don't have anything against the people. I mean, I think Putin's a butthole, all right? But this takes you right to my and there's Jimmy Erie. Hey Jimmy, where is the Tim McGraw cut? Tim McGraw has a huge song out right now called "I Called Mama." It's like storming up the charts. It's the biggest song Tim McGraw has ever had, fastest moving song he's ever had, and Jimmy wrote it. So "I Called Mama." So make sure you hear that if you haven't heard it. But I've wondered about this, and so I don't think that the Russian people hate us. I don't think that we necessarily hate the Russian people, and I just wonder, with common sense, which admittedly we don't have a lot of it in the world today, it seems like. One thing we can agree on is we all want the best, and the best is one thing. There can be different categories, but we're talking about the best. And so we're not talking about among the best or some of the best. I mean, it's the best in every category. I Called Mama's at number 15 right now. Awesome. But looking for the best, you got to know to get to the best. I mean, no matter what side you're on, the best is only one thing. So whether it's Christian, atheist, different color people, different political backgrounds, do you want the best for your kids? Yeah, we want the best. And so that's one thing. So now we have to figure out what that is. But to figure out what that is, you can only know the best by finding the truth. Right? And the truth is like the best, different categories, but it's only one. It can only be one thing. And it's curious that you can find the truth about something and still not accomplish the best if you don't position it in the right way or harness it in the right way. You can know the truth and still not accomplish the best, but you'll never accomplish the best without knowing the truth. And so I wonder sometimes about the people, and that's why I have come up with, and I'm figuring a way to say this without the way I usually say it to closer friends. But it's the Andy Andrews 10 butthole theory of war. That's what I think. I don't think the people hate us. I don't think we hate the people. I think it's like 10 buttholes on their side and 10 buttholes on our side, or when there gets to be war talk and threatening and all, because, I mean, really, you can't come to some kind of understanding to keep tons of people from war. I mean, we can't hold our politicians to some kind of standard. I mean, that's what, how do you kill 11 million people is about. And so I think a lot of times we just don't know, we don't rake for the truth. And so I've had that theory for a while. I think 10 buttholes on their side, 10 buttholes on our side, and we're all letting them. And they just kind of go, well, even though but I've taken this a little farther, and I think that in my perfect world, if they can't come to some way of concluding the business, if they can't come to some kind of understanding where people can be happy and stay alive, and because they're not the ones that are deciding this. They're not the ones going to war, right? I mean, they're not the ones. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not a shrieker. I'm not an anti-war person at all. I'm not a pacifist at all. I'm just saying, shouldn't we avoid it if we could? Of course we could. And so I think, this is just my thought, that if that is true, if the 10 butthole theory of war, and yes, Gatlin, I did say butthole, but that's That's a word that I'm using instead of the word I would use if it was just your daddy and I talking. So if the 10 butthole theory of war is true, and if they can't come to some kind of understanding, then I say the way we settle the conflict is we take their 10 buttholes and our 10 buttholes, and we let them take off all their clothes and get baseball bats and climb into a mud pit, and whoever comes out wins. So maybe the prospect of doing that would have them dial in and figure out how to come to some understanding. But as it is now, they say, well, I'll send troops. Okay, so yeah, that's our kids. I think I would rather you go back to the bargaining table just for another day. Just try it. And then we'll do the mud fight with baseball bats. And then, if you can't settle it that way. Okay, you want to hear the story? I mean, I don't know where I got off on that. But I'm going to tell you the story. This is the biggest disaster that I ever personally saw on national television, live national television. I mentioned yesterday, I talked about Nashville Now and talked about being on that show. And this was years ago, and the Nashville Network was on, and I would occasionally host the show. This is a picture of me hosting the show. I think that's Mickey Gilley, Grandpa Jones, and shoot. He's going to kill me. I can't believe I can't. Some of you know who that is. I mean, I could tell you a ton of his songs. But anyway, that's one thing of me hosting the show. And Nashville Now would air live like at 8 o'clock at night. And then it would repeat again at 11 and repeat again the next morning and repeat again the next afternoon. But 5 days a week. And this thing was huge. I mean, it was a talk show, and it had huge ratings, especially when you consider today's ratings, right? Back then, we kind of thought it was little because they would have 4, 5, 7 million people per show. But now, compared to ratings of today, it was huge. And so every month, I would be booked on that show. They would book me 6 or 7 months in advance so that I would know what night I'm coming in, but once a month I would come in, and then there'd be extra things if I was going to do the guest hosting. Ralph Emery was the host of this show, and Ralph had come out of radio. Ralph is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. I mean, this was a hugely influential man. Is a hugely influential man. Ralph is still cranking, and but there was a time that you didn't have a hit record that did not come through Ralph Emery. I mean, if Ralph didn't put his stamp on it, you didn't have a hit record. And he was just massively powerful in the industry. And fortunately for everybody, he was a good guy. Okay? But I mean, I can hear Ralph in my dreams. I hear that voice, and now please welcome to Nashville Now. I mean, it's just iconic, right? And so he hosted the show, and when Ralph would host, you never really knew what was going to happen, because he was powerful. He knew he was powerful, and so he could take it whatever way he wanted. And if he liked a guest, keep him on longer. He'd do great stuff. But if he didn't like you, that was not good. Okay, I saw a couple of instances. I'll maybe tell some more stories sometime. I'll tell you a couple he didn't like. But they called me one night, or one afternoon, in advance of the show that I had one like 2 weeks ahead of time coming up. And Deborah Bronner called me, and she said, hey, just to let you know, we're doing a tribute show the night that you're coming in. And I said, well, she says, it's a special show. We're going to do a tribute to Jimmie Rodgers. the Trainman. Okay, and this is a famous, country music person. Now, I didn't really know who that was at the time. I do now. And if you think, who's that? Let me just tell you something. There is a massive mural in Concourse E of the Atlanta airport of Jimmy Rogers. He's iconic even today in country music. This is the father of a lot of it. And so Deborah told me, she said, we're doing a tribute show that night. And on tribute shows, we usually just have people who knew that person to talk about it. But you're already booked, and you'll be kind of like a departure, just do your comedy and come to the desk, and Ralph asks you a couple of questions, and we'll move right on. But you'll be a great break in that show. Now, this is what I looked like at the time, okay? At the time, I'm younger guy and kind of trying to get my feet wet in this industry, and I've already had a lot of experience on the show and knew all these people because they told me, they said on the show, a couple of the people that were going to be on the show, they said will be Roy Acuff, okay, and Minnie Pearl. Now, I knew Minnie well. I knew Mr. Roy very well, but I knew Minnie probably better. Minnie was so nice to me, and they were going to be on the show. Now, I got to tell you this. On the tribute show to Jimmy Rogers, they said, we're flying in 50 members of his family, right? His children, the cousins, the grandchildren, the great grandchildren. Now, Jimmy Rogers has passed away. But they're flying in his family. Now, Nashville now had a huge audience. There'd be like 1,000, 1,500 people in this live audience. It was the biggest live audience in television at the time. And so they're going to have Jimmy Rogers' family sitting on that first row. And so I'm like, okay. I was just glad to be there. Okay. And now I get there that night, and I'm very aware that this is what we're going to do. Now, you need to understand that at the time, the Gaylord Corporation, who owned Opryland and that whole area, they had built Roy Acuff this house. Okay, now, if you don't know Roy Acuff, just look him up. This is, Wabash Cannonball. This is a huge father of country music kind of person, and he was an icon. And so they had built him, the National Network and Gaylord Corporation had built him this huge, beautiful house right down from the studios at Nashville Now. And now, curiously, Opryland, the theme park, was there, and his house overlooked this curve of Grizzly River Rampage. And so, you're in this boat, and this bumper boat, and going down these, and Mr. Roy would come out on his back deck, and you'd look up, and they're 5 feet from you. It's, oh my God, there's Roy Acuff. As he splashed into a brick wall or something. It was very odd. But he had this house. Now, at the time, Mr. Roy, nobody knew anything about Alzheimer's at that time. It just, people got old and they would get forgetful or whatever. But Mr. Roy was drifting into that at that point. It wasn't horrible yet, but he was drifting into it. Now, I knew this because I'm there every month. And backstage at Nashville Now, there would be the picnic tables out there. And so before the show, the show's band, the guests, and the guest families, everybody's kind of sitting out at the picnic table talking. Well, Mr. Roy would walk 50 yards up the road from his house to the backstage area. And you'd see him almost every night that you were there. And so some nights he would come up to me and he would say, Andy, how you doing? I said, I'm doing good, Mr. Roy. How are you? Doing fine. I saw that thing you did the last time you were on. I saw that thing you did, and I loved that part about it. And he'd talk about it, and he'd say, that's one thing you could take certain ways. And he would talk to me about, material and like this, and he would tell me stories. And then the next month I might be there, and he'd come up and he'd say, "Hello, son, what's your name?" And I say, "I'm Andy Andrews, Mr. Roy." He said, "Well, nice to meet you. What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a comedian." He said, "Well, I watch you tonight. I'm sure you're funny." But you just didn't really know which Mr. Roy you were going to get. Sweet man, but you just didn't know, right? So we go on the air at 8 o'clock. And the first person to the couch is Minnie Pearl. And so there's Ralph Emery there, and he's got Minnie Pearl. And he said, Ralph says, "Minnie, tell me your memories of Jimmie Rogers." And so, Minnie would say, "Oh, Ralph, I remember, when Hank and I would be out at the opera, and Hank and I would be out in the alley between shows, and Jimmy would come out, and I remember one time Hank Williams said," and she just told several stories, and Ralph asked her questions. It went great. People were just happy. They were delighted, and Jimmie Rogers' family sitting there on the very first row, and so then. Go to commercial. Come back from commercial. Ralph says, "Please welcome. You know him. We've had him. It's Andy Andrews." So I'm out, and I do like 5-6 minutes of comedy, and then come over to the desk. Now Minnie moves down. Think about this. Minnie moves down. So it's Ralph sitting at the desk. Then it's me, and then it's Minnie. And Ralph says, "Andy, do you remember anything about Jimmie Rogers?" And I said, "Ralph, I've done a lot of reading about him, and just honored to be here tonight. I don't personally remember him, but gosh, just everything that he did and the things he represented, it's such an honor to be here tonight on the Jimmie Rogers tribute." And so that was pretty much it. And so then they go to a commercial. All right, so when we come back from a commercial, they already have Mr. Roy sitting there. All right, so think about this now. There's Ralph Emery at the desk. Then there's Roy Acuff. Then me. And then Minnie Pearl. And Ralph says, "We are back. Welcome back to Nashville now. The Jimmie Rogers Tribute Show. We're honored to have members of Jimmy's family, fans from all over the world for this tremendous show. And we have here with us tonight Roy Acuff." People just, they, "Oh my gosh, oh Roy." And Ralph turns to Roy and he says, "Roy, thank you for being here tonight. What are your memories of Jimmie Rogers?" And Mr. Roy said, "Well, I never liked the man myself." And Ralph didn't say anything. And Minnie leans over, and she leans over me, and she's going to try to save it. And she says, "Oh, Roy, you don't mean that." And he said, "I do mean it. The man was mean as hell. Let me tell you what he did one time." And nobody could shut him up. I mean, it was, for somebody like me, for somebody like me, I love watching great entertainment, and I love watching disasters. I can be entertained by either. Either is fine with me. And especially if I didn't cause it, okay? And I didn't cause that one, thank God. But it was a beautiful moment for me. I will never forget the panic in Ralph's eyes, the panic in Minnie's eyes, both of them kind of knowing what was going on, and Mr. Roy just determined to tell you this. No, I didn't like him. I did not like him. And let me tell you another thing he did. It was like, why don't you go to a commercial? Because this is live with no delay. The first one, live with no delay. Now, I don't know what they did on the repeats, but it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable moment. Their for the Jimmy Rogers tribute. Now, to wrap this up, let me just tell you this. If you go visit the Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville, this is where they had the opera years and years ago. Now it's out there where the Opryland used to be, in that same area. But if you go to the old Opry House, there, the Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville, and just go in the lobby, over to the left is a bronze statue, and it's life size, okay? And it's a bronze of a park bench, and sitting on that park bench, life-size bronze, is Roy Acuff, and there's a little space in between, and then there's Minnie Pearl in bronze. And I do not go to the old Ryman Auditorium that I don't sit down in between those two and put my arm around them, and I go, so, anybody got anything they want to say about Jimmy Rogers? It's just one of those great moments that I will never forget. And it's not on YouTube, but a lot of those Nashville Now things are not on YouTube. At some point, we'll see if we can find some stuff. I did a thing one time with Randy Travis, and I was doing a tour of the Stars' homes, and came up, and we set him up to be living in a tent. And so maybe we find that one. But most of these moments you can't find. I wish I could get a hold of some of this stuff. I occasionally run into people who say, I have a tape. We used to run the VCR when Nashville Now was on. I have the tape of so-and-so, and I have the tape. But, man, I got a bunch of stories. Now, we won't be telling them all in a row like we do like this, but I've got stories of tons of people. And maybe I should do a book about these stories, but it'd probably only be you and me who would, I'd write it, and then you 20 people would probably read it. I mean, hopefully we have more than 20 people on here, but maybe you 40 people would read it. But you guys, I think we're at an end. So next week, we don't know what days we'll be doing it, but if you've pressed your notification button, if you're just going to keep an eye out. Also, if you're on YouTube, or if you know what YouTube is, or if you ever crossed by YouTube, just put Andy Andrews in there and click it, and it'll take you to one of the Andy Andrews channels, or the Andy Andrews channel. It'll take you to one of the videos, and click on one of those videos, and you'll see a subscription button come up. That would really help me if you would just subscribe to that. And it doesn't cost anything, but all it does is, when you go on YouTube in the future, over on the left on your homepage, it will have whatever you have subscribed to. And so it'll, like Andy Andrews, and it'll list the newest thing. Or you can have that newest thing sent to your inbox if you want to. But it would really help me if you would subscribe. And anything else before we go? I hope you guys have a great July 4th. We're going to have July 4th between the times we see each other. Just did an awesome, created an awesome podcast for next week. I interviewed Kelly Masters, who is the most successful woman agent in NFL history, and she was the very first woman agent to actually have a player drafted. Some of her stories are hilarious. You don't want to miss that podcast. It comes out next Tuesday, and on the West Coast, it'll come out at 3:15 in the morning. Anything else, you guys? I appreciate you joining me for these moments at lunchtime. We're going to have some learning and some laughter. Jimmy, I hope you don't have too much explaining to do about the word butthole to Gatlin and why Uncle Andy said butthole. But Have a great 4th of July. Know that there's tons to be grateful for, even though we are inconvenienced during the great hunkering. There's plenty to be grateful for. We can count many blessings, and among those blessings that I count are you. Thank you. Happy 4th of July. See you next week on the Blue Plate Special.